The myth awakens. The Grand Assembly Hall floated in the void between stars, a magnificent structure of living crystal and flowing light that had stood as the symbol of galactic unity for 8,000 years. Inside its vast chamber, representatives from 400 civilizations gathered in their designated sectors, each species separated by carefully calibrated environmental barriers that maintained their unique atmospheric requirements. Ambassador Theron of the Velshan Collective adjusted his ceremonial robes as he approached the central speaking platform. His species, tall and willowy with skin that shimmered like oil on water, had served as diplomatic mediators for 3 millennia. Today, however, he came not as a mediator but as a messenger of warning. The murmur of countless languages filled the air, each translated in real time by neural implants that every assembly member wore. Theron could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes, visual sensors, and perception fields focusing on him as he reached the podium. High Chancellor Orin, a being composed of crystallized thought patterns suspended in a containment field, pulsed with formal acknowledgement. Ambassador Theron of Velsha, you have requested emergency session privileges. The Assembly recognizes your right to speak. Theron activated his data tablet, projecting holographic images above the Assembly floor. Honored members, I come before you with grave news. Over the past 6 standard months, 17 colonies along our outer rim have gone silent. Not destroyed. Silent. Every inhabitant vanished without distress signals or signs of struggle. A ripple of concern passed through the chamber, but it was muted. The galaxy had been at peace for so long that even the word threat seemed archaic. Council member Zeph, a floating entity of bioluminescent gases, spoke with skepticism. Surely this is a technical malfunction, Ambassador. Communication failures happen. Perhaps solar storms or equipment degradation. That was our initial assessment, Theron replied, his voice steady. Until our deep space monitoring stations detected them. The hologram shifted, showing grainy footage of something moving through space. The shapes were organic, pulsating, wrong. We call them the Devourers. They consume everything. Technology, organic matter, even the minerals in planetary crusts. They leave nothing behind but empty husks. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices. Some delegates laughed nervously, others demanded more proof, and a few sat in stunned silence. Preposterous, declared Representative Finn, whose species had evolved from aquatic mammals. No organism could consume technology. This violates basic biological principles. These beings violate many principles we consider fundamental, Theron said grimly. Our scientists believe they operate as a collective consciousness, able to adapt and evolve at unprecedented speeds. They have already consumed 23 worlds. The rate is accelerating. Commander Vex of the Crothy Dominion rose from his delegation's platform. His species, one of the few that maintained any military tradition, stood nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms and chitinous armor plating. Ambassador Theron, my scouts have confirmed your reports. We engaged a Devourer scouting party last week. We lost 6 ships before we could retreat. These entities are real, and they are coming. A cold silence fell over the assembly. Commander Vex was known for his pragmatism, not hysteria. If he confirmed the threat, many would reconsider their skepticism. High Chancellor Orin's patterns fluctuated with concern. Commander Vex, what are our defensive capabilities? Vex's mandibles clicked in what Theron recognized as dark amusement. Defensive capabilities? Chancellor, we have none. The Assembly disbanded organized military forces 3,000 years ago. My people maintain patrol ships for piracy and smuggling, not warfare. Against a threat like this, we might as well throw rocks. Then we must negotiate, Orin declared. We will send diplomatic envoys. Find out what they want. Every species desires something. We will offer trade, territory, resources, whatever prevents bloodshed. They want everything, Theron said quietly. They are not invaders seeking conquest. They are a plague seeking sustenance. You cannot negotiate with hunger itself. The assembly descended into chaos. Delegates shouted over each other, some demanding immediate action, others insisting on diplomatic solutions, and many simply refusing to believe the threat was real. They had lived in peace for so long that the concept of existential danger seemed impossible. Theron felt despair creeping into his heart. He had known this would be difficult, but he had hoped for better. These beings had forgotten what it meant to fight, to struggle, to face annihilation. They had grown soft in their paradise of peace. As the arguments raged, Theron noticed something curious. High Chancellor Oren's patterns had shifted to a specific configuration he had never seen before. The Chancellor was accessing something in the Assembly's deepest archives, records that predated even the oldest living species. Silence. Oren's voice boomed through every translator simultaneously, a rare use of absolute authority. The chamber fell quiet. There may be another option. An old option. An option most of you believe to be myth. Oren projected a document so ancient that its data format required multiple translation layers. The text appeared in the common tongue, though the original language was listed as Terran Standard English, extinct. The Terran Protocol, Oren read aloud. Established in galactic year 2847 by the First Assembly and the Terran Alliance. Article 1. In the event of existential threat to the Assembly or its member worlds, the Terran Alliance agrees to provide military intervention upon activation of the distress beacon. Article 2. The Terran Alliance reserves the right to maintain independence and isolation during peacetime. Article 3. This treaty remains in effect in perpetuity. Laughter erupted throughout the chamber. Not polite chuckles, but genuine mocking laughter. The Terran Protocol. Representative Finn gasped between laughs. You're citing bedtime stories now. Next, you'll tell us to call upon the Star Guardians or the Cosmic Dragons. Humans are propaganda, Zeph added, their gases swirling with amusement. Stories our ancestors invented to justify their wars. Fight together or the terrible humans will devour us all. It's manipulation through fear, nothing more. Commander Vex did not laugh. His species maintained oral histories that others had abandoned. The stories described humans as warriors without equal. Beings who refused to surrender even to each other, who fought wars that scarred their entire planet. They supposedly destroyed themselves in nuclear fire rather than accept defeat. Exactly, Finn said triumphantly. They're extinct. Dead. Gone. Even if they were real, they killed themselves 10,000 years ago. How does a dead species help us now? Theron had been studying the Terran Protocol during the exchange. Something about it felt different from other ancient myths. The legal language was too precise, too specific. The coordinates and activation codes were too detailed. Myths were vague. This was a contract. What if they didn't die? Theron asked, his voice cutting through the mockery. What if they survived? The laughter intensified. And did what, Ambassador? Finn asked. Hid in a corner of space for 10 millennia. The quarantine zone, Theron said, pieces falling into place in his mind. Sector 001. The Forbidden Region. We've maintained it for 8,000 years, yet no one remembers why. Ships that enter never return. Sensors detect nothing. We simply avoid it. Because it's empty space with unusual gravitational anomalies, Zeph countered. There's nothing there. Or something that doesn't want to be detected, Commander Vex said thoughtfully. A species that values isolation. A species that maintains watch without revealing themselves. A species that waits. High Chancellor Oren's patterns shifted to decision configuration. The coordinates in the Terran Protocol point to Sector 001. The activation codes are encoded in quantum entanglement, meaning any signal would arrive instantaneously regardless of distance. You cannot be serious, Representative Finn protested. You would waste resources on a fairy tale while real threats approach our worlds. What choice do we have? Oren asked simply. Commander Vex admits our defenses are inadequate. Diplomatic efforts will fail against an enemy that does not communicate. We are facing extinction. If there is even a fractional chance that humans exist and will honor this treaty, we must take it. The assembly voted. The result was close, but desperation won over skepticism. They would activate the beacon. Theron volunteered to perform the activation himself. He traveled to the ancient communications array on Assembly Prime, a facility so old that its original purpose had been forgotten. Technicians had to decipher multiple layers of obsolete code just to access the beacon controls. The activation sequence was surprisingly simple once they broke through the security. Theron entered the coordinates, input the quantum encryption keys, and placed his hand on the final authorization panel. "This is insane," one of the technicians muttered. "We're sending a message to empty space based on a contract written before our grandparents' were born." "Perhaps," Theron agreed. "But doing nothing guarantees our extinction. This at least gives us hope, even if that hope is built on myth." He activated the beacon. For exactly 3 seconds, the array channeled more power than most star systems produced in a year. The quantum-entangled particles transmitted the distress call instantaneously across spacetime itself, bypassing the normal limitations of light speed and relativity. Then the system went dormant, having fulfilled its singular purpose after 10,000 years of waiting. Nothing happened. Theron stood in the control room, staring at silent screens, feeling foolish. Of course nothing happened. He had sent a message to ghosts and legends. The assembly had wasted precious time on children's stories while real threats approached their worlds. "Well," the technician said awkwardly, "at least we tried." Theron nodded, unable to speak. He had convinced the assembly to trust him, and he had led them nowhere. The devourers would come, and they would have no defense because they had chased myths instead of preparing for reality. He returned to his quarters on Assembly Prime and tried to sleep, but guilt kept him awake. Tomorrow, he would have to face the assembly again and admit his failure. Tomorrow, they would have to find another way, though he could not imagine what that might be. At 0347 station time, every sensor on Assembly Prime screamed simultaneously. Theron bolted upright in his bed as alarms blared throughout the station. His communicator exploded with urgent messages. The station's AI spoke with unusual urgency. "All personnel to observation decks. Spatial anomaly detected. Multiple massive contacts emerging from Sector 001. Theron ran. He was not alone. Hundreds of beings filled the corridors, all rushing toward the observation windows. By the time he reached the main viewing gallery, it was already packed, but his diplomatic credentials got him to the front. Space itself was tearing open. 12 wounds in reality gaped before them, each one bleeding light and radiation as something massive pushed through from somewhere else. The phenomenon was wrong on every level, violating physics and causality simultaneously. The first ship emerged. It was enormous, easily 2 kilometers long, built in a design that seemed to balance brutal efficiency with predatory grace. Its hull was dark metal inscribed with markings in an unknown language. Weapons bristled along every surface, visible and unapologetic. This was not a ship built for exploration or trade. This was a warship, pure and simple. 11 more followed, each one slightly different in configuration but unmistakably from the same fleet. They moved with purpose and precision, forming a battle formation in seconds that spoke of endless practice and perfect coordination. The assembly's communication systems activated automatically. A signal came through on all frequencies, first in a harsh, rhythmic language that the translators could not parse. Then it switched to perfect galactic standard, though with an accent no living being had ever heard. "This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Rivera of the United Earth ship Indomitable, commanding the Terran Expeditionary Force. We received your distress call. Earth remembers its commitments and honors its treaties. Please identify your situation and the nature of the threat you face. Humanity has returned. The observation deck fell absolutely silent. 400 species, countless worlds, thousands of years of civilization, all frozen in shock. Humans were real. Earth existed. And they had come to help. Theron found his voice first, his hands shaking as he activated the communication channel. Admiral Rivera, this is Ambassador Theron of the Veltian Collective, speaking for the Galactic Assembly. We face invasion by an entity we call the Devourers. They have consumed 23 worlds and are advancing toward our core systems. We have no effective military response. His voice broke slightly, we did not believe you existed until this moment. There was a pause. When Admiral Rivera responded, Theron could hear something in his voice. Not anger, not judgment. Something that might have been sadness mixed with grim determination. We know, Ambassador. We've been monitoring Assembly communications for millennia. We know you thought we were myths. We know you disbanded your defenses. We know you forgot how to fight. Another pause. It's fortunate, then, that we never did. Transmitting tactical data now. Stand by for combat operations. Humanity has arrived, and we remember how to wage war. The 12 human warships turned as one, their sensors already locked on targets that the Assembly's instruments had not yet detected. Somewhere beyond the system's edge, the Devourers were coming. But now, something was waiting for them. Something that had spent 10,000 years alone in the dark, preparing, training, remembering. Something that had never forgotten what it meant to be humanity. The Assembly had called for help from legends and myths. Instead, they had awakened something far more terrifying. They had awakened warriors who had been sharpening their teeth in the darkness, waiting for this exact moment. Waiting to prove that humanity was no fairy tale. The war was about to begin. The Return to Terran warships held position at the system's edge, their dark hulls reflecting starlight like predators waiting in shadow. Ambassador Theron watched from Assembly Prime's observation deck as the human vessels maintained their formation with mechanical precision. Each ship was a statement of purpose, built not for beauty or diplomacy but for one singular function, war. High Chancellor Orin materialized beside Theron, their crystalline form pulsing with anxious patterns. The Assembly is in chaos. Half our members are celebrating. The other half are terrified. Some are demanding the humans leave immediately. Leave? Theron could not hide his disbelief. We called them here. We activated their beacon. Yes, and now some council members realize what we have done. We have invited warriors into our peaceful galaxy. Warriors who have spent 10,000 years doing nothing but preparing for war. What happens when the Devourers are defeated? Will the humans simply leave? Or will they decide they prefer our civilized worlds to their isolated darkness? Theron had not considered this. The thought chilled his blood. But before he could respond, every screen in the observation deck lit up with an incoming transmission. Fleet Admiral Marcus Rivera's face appeared. He was human, unmistakably so, matching the ancient descriptions perfectly. His skin was darker than the void of space, his hair cut short in military fashion, and his eyes held the weight of command and countless difficult decisions. He wore a uniform of deep blue with insignia that meant nothing to the Assembly but clearly signified rank and authority. Galactic Assembly, this is Admiral Rivera. We have completed our initial sensor sweep. The situation is worse than your distress call indicated. The Devourers have already established forward staging positions in 7 systems. Their main fleet numbers approximately 4,000 vessels and is advancing on a broad front toward your core worlds. At current speed, they will reach Assembly Prime in 18 standard days. The observation deck erupted in panic. 4,000 ships. 18 days. The numbers were impossible, overwhelming, final, Rivera continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. However, we have also identified tactical opportunities. The Devourers operate as a distributed hive intelligence, which means they require constant communication between nodes. Disrupt that communication, and their coordination collapses. We have faced similar enemies before. Commander Vex pushed through the crowd to stand beside Theron. Admiral Rivera, this is Commander Vex of the Crothy Dominion. My forces engaged a Devourer scouting party. We could not penetrate their organic armor. Our weapons were ineffective. How do you propose to succeed where we failed? Rivera's expression did not change. Commander, with respect, your weapons were designed for law enforcement and piracy interdiction. Ours were designed for war. We will demonstrate. Admiral Rivera out. The transmission ended. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the human warships moved, they accelerated with shocking speed, their engines leaving trails of exotic radiation that the assembly's sensors struggled to classify. Within minutes, they had crossed the inner system and were approaching the fourth planet, a mining colony that had been evacuated when Devourer scouts were detected in orbit. Theron watched the tactical display as 12 human ships closed on 37 Devourer vessels. The enemy ships were grotesque things, more grown than built, with irregular surfaces that pulsed with sickly bioluminescence. They moved like living creatures, unpredictable and organic. They are outnumbered 3-1, Orin whispered. This is suicide. But the humans did not behave like beings facing suicide. They split into 3 groups, spreading out in a formation that seemed designed to invite attack. The Devourers took the bait eagerly, 20 vessels breaking formation to swarm the nearest human group. What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries. The human ships moved like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They did not simply dodge incoming fire, they seemed to predict it, moving before shots were fired. Their vessels spun, rolled, and accelerated in directions that should have torn them apart from gravitational forces alone. They flew through the Devourer formation like predators among prey, then they returned fire. Weapons that had no names in any galactic database tore into the Devourer swarm. Beams of concentrated energy burned through organic hulls designed to regenerate damage. Kinetic projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed punched through armor and kept going, striking multiple targets. Missiles changed direction mid-flight, pursuing their targets with relentless determination, but what truly shocked the watching assembly was the electromagnetic pulse weapons. When they fired, the Devourer ships spasmed violently, their hive connection disrupted, their coordination shattered. Suddenly, they were not a coordinated swarm but individual creatures, confused and vulnerable. The battle lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. 20 Devourer vessels destroyed. 17 more disabled and drifting. The remaining ships fled at maximum speed, broadcasting distress signals on frequencies the assembly had never detected before. The human fleet regrouped without a single loss. One ship, the vessel designated UES Valiant, showed minor scoring on its hull plating. That was the extent of their damage. The observation deck was silent except for the sound of beings struggling to process what they had witnessed. Commander Vex spoke first, his voice filled with something between awe and fear. They did not just win. They dominated. They made it look easy. Theron's communicator chimed. A direct message from Admiral Rivera requesting a meeting aboard the Indomitable. The invitation was polite but firm. Theron accepted immediately. The human shuttle that arrived to transport him was another revelation. Small, angular, and efficient, it moved with the same predatory grace as the warships. The pilot, a human woman with red hair and startling green eyes, greeted him with professional courtesy. Ambassador Theron. I'm Lieutenant Sarah Kellerman. Welcome aboard. The Admiral is expecting you. The interior of the shuttle was cramped and utilitarian. Every surface served a purpose. There were no decorations, no comfort features, nothing that did not contribute to the vessel's function. This was how humans built everything, Theron realized. Form following function with absolute dedication. The flight to the Indomitable took 20 minutes. As they approached, Theron got his first close look at a human warship. It was even more impressive up close. The hull was composed of some alloy that his species had no reference for, inscribed with markings that might have been writing or might have been decoration. Weapons turrets tracked their approach with unsettling precision. The shuttle docked in a hangar that could have held 50 more just like it. Human crew members moved with purpose through the space, performing tasks with practiced efficiency. They glanced at Theron with curiosity but did not stop their work. Lieutenant Kellerman escorted him through corridors that reminded him of blood vessels, each one capable of being sealed independently if the ship was breached. Emergency equipment was mounted every few meters. Damage control stations were built into the walls. This ship was designed to take punishment and keep fighting. They reached the bridge, and Theron experienced another shock. The command center was not elegant or peaceful. It was pure function, dozens of stations monitoring weapons, engineering, sensors, communications, damage control. Humans worked at each station with intense focus, speaking in clipped military language. Admiral Rivera stood at the center of it all, a calm point in controlled chaos. He turned as Theron entered and offered a human gesture of greeting, extending his hand. Theron had researched this custom and clasped the Admiral's hand firmly. "Ambassador Theron. Thank you for coming. I know this must all be overwhelming. Admiral Rivera, I must be honest. We did not expect you to exist. We certainly did not expect you to be so formidable. Your demonstration was remarkable." Rivera's expression turned grim. "That was not a demonstration, Ambassador. That was a skirmish. The real battle hasn't begun. Please, walk with me. We need to discuss strategy, and I need to understand your capabilities." They moved to a briefing room adjacent to the bridge. The walls were covered with tactical displays showing the entire sector. Red markers indicated devourer positions. Blue markers showed human fleet positions. Yellow markers showed contested zones. It was a map of war, something the Assembly had not needed for millennia. "Ambassador, I need you to understand our situation," Rivera began. "We brought 12 ships because we did not know what we would face. We have sent a message to Earth requesting reinforcements, but they will not arrive for approximately 15 standard days. Until then, we are alone against an enemy that outnumbers us more than 300 to 1. Theron felt his hope crumble again. "Then we are doomed." "No," Rivera said firmly. "We are challenged. There is a difference. Humans have faced impossible odds before. We are still here. But I need your help. I need intelligence on the Devourers. I need to know their psychology, their tactics, their weaknesses. Everything your people have learned." Theron shared everything. The Assembly had collected data on 17 different encounters with the Devourers. Every species that had engaged them had been overwhelmed. The creatures seemed to have no central leadership, yet they coordinated perfectly across vast distances. They did not negotiate, did not communicate, did not show mercy. They simply consumed. Rivera listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed a military mind that thought in terms of vulnerabilities and opportunities. When Theron finished, the Admiral nodded slowly. "They are not so different from certain Earth species. Army ants, locust swarms, certain types of bacteria. We have dealt with hive intelligences before, just on a much smaller scale." "How did you defeat them on Earth?" Theron asked desperately. "We did not defeat them, Ambassador. We learned to coexist with them, to avoid them when possible, and to strike at their critical points when avoidance was not an option. Every hive has a queen, every swarm has a nest, every network has nodes that are more important than others. We need to find the Devourer's central intelligence. Destroy or disable that, and the rest will collapse. That would require penetrating deep into their territory," Theron said. "Every ship that has tried has been destroyed. Every ship that has tried did not have human stealth technology," Rivera replied. "The Indomitable is equipped with systems that can hide us from most sensors. We will find their home territory, identify their command structure, and strike at their heart." "You would risk yourself?" "The fleet commander." Rivera's expression hardened. "Ambassador, humans have a saying, never ask someone to do something you would not do yourself. If I want my people to risk their lives, I must be willing to risk mine. That is not heroism. It is simply leadership. Before Theron could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. A tactical officer called out urgently. "Admiral, multiple contacts emerging from FTL. Devourer signatures." "Sir, it's their main fleet. Hundreds of ships. They are arriving in force." The tactical display updated with a cascade of red markers appearing at the edge of the system. Theron felt his legs weaken as the numbers climbed. 500 ships. 600. 700. The Devourers were not probing anymore. They were invading with overwhelming force. Rivera's expression did not change. He simply nodded as if he had expected this. Battle stations. Signal all ships to form defensive formation. Pattern Omega 7. Prepare for extended engagement. He turned to Theron. "Ambassador, I need you to return to Assembly Prime. You will be safer there, and I need to focus on the battle." "Admiral, there are too many." "You cannot possibly. We will do what we must," Rivera interrupted. "That is what humans do. We face impossible odds, and we find a way. Get to your shuttle, Ambassador. And send a message to your assembly. Tell them humanity has returned, and we do not surrender. We do not retreat. We do not fail those who call us for help." Lieutenant Kellerman escorted Theron back to the shuttle at a run. As they fled the Indomitable, Theron watched through the viewport as the 12 human warships turned to face the approaching swarm. 12 ships against 700. It was suicide. It was madness. It was humanity. The human fleet accelerated toward the enemy, not away. They did not wait for the Devourers to come to them. They attacked, diving into the swarm like predators that had no fear of being outnumbered. Theron watched from his shuttle as impossible things happened. Human ships moved through the Devourer formation like ghosts, appearing and disappearing, striking and vanishing. Their weapons created zones of destruction that consumed dozens of enemy vessels at once. They coordinated with perfection that the assembly had never achieved, each ship knowing exactly where the others would be, what they would do, how they would move. The Devourers adapted quickly. They began to swarm individual human ships, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. The UES Valiant took heavy damage, its hull breached in multiple locations. It should have been destroyed. Instead, it accelerated toward the densest concentration of enemy ships and detonated something in its forward section. The explosion created a chain reaction that destroyed 47 Devourer vessels and crippled 100 more, but the Valiant survived. Somehow, impossibly, the human ship had calculated the blast to spare its own aft sections. It limped away, venting atmosphere and leaking radiation, but still functional and still fighting. "They fight like they have already accepted death," Lieutenant Kellerman said quietly, watching the battle. "But they refuse to die anyway." The battle raged for 6 hours. The human fleet took massive damage. Every ship was scarred, wounded, bleeding into space. But they did not break. They did not run. They held their position and made the Devourers pay in blood for every meter of space. When the Devourer fleet finally withdrew, they had lost 412 ships. The humans had lost none, though several ships would require extensive repairs. The galaxy had not seen warfare like this in 5,000 years. Now they remembered why their ancestors had been so terrified of humans. Now they understood why the old treaties had been written with such careful language and such permanent bindings. Humanity had returned. And they had brought war with them. Theron returned to Assembly Prime to find the Council in chaos. Some members were celebrating the human victory. Others were demanding the humans be asked to leave immediately. A few species were already preparing to evacuate their home worlds, not because they feared the Devourers, but because they feared the humans. High Chancellor Oren called for order repeatedly, their crystalline form flickering with stress. "We must decide our course of action. The humans have proven their military capability. But what are their intentions? What do they want in return for their help? Why do we assume they want anything? Commander Vex asked. They answered a treaty obligation. Perhaps that is simply what honorable beings do. No species does anything without price, Representative Finn argued. They will demand territory, resources, political influence. We have invited conquerors to save us from consumption. Which fate is worse? Theron stood and spoke with quiet intensity. I have met them. I have walked their ships. I have spoken with their commander. They are warriors, yes. They are dangerous, absolutely. But they are also beings of honor who keep their promises across 10,000 years of isolation. They came when we called. They fought when we could not. They bled to protect worlds that are not their own. We owe them our respect, at minimum. And if they decide to stay? Finn pressed. If they decide our peaceful galaxy would be better under their protection permanently? What then? The question hung in the air, unanswered, because no one knew. The assembly had called for help from legends, and legends had arrived. Now they had to live with the consequences. Admiral Rivera's voice cut through the debate, transmitted directly into the assembly chamber. Galactic Assembly, this is Fleet Admiral Rivera. I am aware of your concerns about humanity's intentions. Let me be clear, Earth has no interest in conquest. We did not spend 10,000 years alone in the dark so we could rule over others. We spent that time preparing to help those who needed us when they needed us most. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. We came because you called. We fight because you cannot. When this war is over, we will return to our isolation if that is what you wish. But until the devourers are defeated, until your worlds are safe, humanity will stand between you and annihilation. This is not negotiable. This is not conditional. This is who we are. Admiral Rivera out. The assembly chamber fell silent. Theron looked around at his fellow delegates and saw his own emotions reflected in their alien faces. Fear, yes. Uncertainty, certainly. But also something else. Something they had not felt in millennia. Hope. The war was far from over. The devourers would return with greater numbers and better tactics. Many worlds would burn before the end came. Much blood would be spilled, human and alien alike. But for the first time since the crisis began, the galaxy believed it might survive. Because humanity had returned from myth and legend to remind them of a simple truth that had been forgotten in the long peace. Sometimes, the only answer to overwhelming darkness is overwhelming force wielded by those willing to stand in the breach and refuse to fall. Sometimes, what civilization needs most is not diplomacy or negotiation or understanding. Sometimes, what civilization needs is warriors who remember how to fight. The Galactic Assembly had called for help from fairy tales. Instead, they had awakened something older than their oldest civilizations, something that had been waiting in the dark with sharp teeth and sharper minds. They had awakened humanity. And humanity, it turned out, was very good at war. The next morning, 15 human reinforcement fleets emerged from the quarantine zone. 300 additional warships, each one carrying the lessons learned from 10,000 years of preparation. Earth had heard the call. Earth remembered its promises. And Earth had arrived in force. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of peace was over. But perhaps, when the war ended, a new age would begin. An age where peace was protected by those strong enough to defend it. An age where the galaxy remembered that civilization was not guaranteed but earned every day by those willing to stand watch in the darkness. The age of humanity had begun again. And this time, the galaxy would not forget.